Hello, my 507 MFA students. Sounds like I have 507 MFA students. Anyway, welcome to Module 9. Yes, this is the one where we get to do our final project. This video, I'm really going to be focused on the how-to of the final project. We're just going to kind of glance on these other stuff because this is online class and you can read this on your own. But I want to make sure I have plenty of time to help you figure out how to best approach the final project. So basically, you can read the learning objectives and the module at a glance. There's two things we're going to be really doing as far as deliverables, which will be a discussion board and will be your final project. Okay, so let's kind of get right to go through this real quick. Go ahead and read through this again. This kind of talks about your view and your place in the bigger overall world, and kind of what we're going to be doing as far as this class. So read through this. Again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because you can read through that yourself. Again, I want to make sure I'm spending more time on this video on the how-to. The discussion board is basically you're going to be introducing an author, kind of pretend. And so this resource right here, How to Introduce an Author, is a great resource to help you with that, which we'll talk about as one of the deliverables, which will be the discussion board. Okay, moving on to there. Here is the discussion board. So again, basically you're going to pretend you will stand on an imaginary podium and introduce your peers to an author you admire. And then you're going to basically just kind of go through these prompts. Overall, everyone does very well with these discussion boards. So yeah, you can learn a little bit more about one of your favorite authors, and so go ahead and just post this as far as the discussion board, and yeah, fun times for it. So good stuff there. All right, now let's get right to the final project. Now, in Module 7, you gotta move forward for me there. Okay, in Module 7, you started to create a toolkit. And this is a toolkit that is going to be a helpful part to this final project. But the final project is more than just what you did. Okay. So in Module 7, you created a toolkit. Module 8, you posted that toolkit for other people to see. You also received feedback from me on your toolkit. And you're going to take all that information, my information, your first draft of the toolkit, the feedback that you got from fellow students, and you're going to take that and integrate all that information into a brand new project, which is the Craft Element Toolkit. Now, I'm going to show you the rubric, and I'm going to recommend a certain way that I would approach this if I were a student. So please pay attention, because when I first pulled this up and started going through this assignment, I'm like, wow, there is too much. And then I just started breaking it down. I'm like, okay, all right, not too bad. So please bear with me. So if we click on the final project guidelines and rubrics, so I've already pulled that up, let's get right to it. So this is what it's going to go through. This is going to kind of say, hey, it's time to assemble your toolkit. This gives you a lot of the whys, okay, of what's going on and why you're doing this and stuff like this, and this prompts of what you're going to be doing and what's, okay. So a lot of this is basically just the why behind why you're doing this particular assignment, okay? And it's good to read, and go ahead and read that. And again, I'm fully on board with this. But often, the why I'm doing something and how to do it are two different things. So I'm going to focus on the how to do something. So here, if I'm a student, this is the way that I would approach it, okay? So if you remember back to your toolkit, you were supposed to find, as it says up here, 4 to 6 craft elements. 4 to 6 craft elements. Well, if you did the toolkit for Module 7, you've done that. You've already picked 4 to 6 craft elements. Yay, good for you, okay? So then you're going to take each one of these elements. For each element, okay, so for me, I'm going to break this down one element at a time, like many of you did. You're going to write 1 to 2 pages that include the following. That is for each element. Okay, you with me? So for each element, so let's say my first element would be dialogue, I'm going to write 1 to 2 pages about dialogue, and it's going to include the following information. Okay, it says an example from one of the novels you read, an example from strategy of your own work, reflection how the strategy, you're like, okay, what does that even mean? What am I supposed to do? Well, that's when we're going to go down here and we're going to look at the rubric, okay? So for each element, write 1 to 2 pages that include the following. Well, what do I need to include? So I'm going to scroll down here to the rubric, okay? So as the professor, what I'm going to look for is evaluates the author use of craft elements in literature for informed writing. So what you need to do is if your first craft element, again, let's say is dialogue, then did you provide an example of an author's use? Okay, so that's from one of your books that you read, or it could be from 2 books, from the books that you read this semester, okay? Did you explain how the author used the craft elements in the work? So again, we didn't necessarily do this in the first toolbox. Some of you did, but this is when you're actually looking at this craft element you picked and you're looking for examples from the texts that you read this semester, and then answer the question, evaluates how the author's use of the craft elements influences how one would or would not use this in your own writing. So again, right now I'm just focusing on one of the craft elements. Again, minimum of 4 of these. Okay, so I'm answering that question. So again, I would say focus on dialogue, and then the author's use of craft elements, I would answer these questions. Then you have the writer's toolkit. This is basically what you did before, okay? Though this is what you identified with Module 7. So this is basically what you did for Module 7, where it has your own stuff. Okay, I wouldn't just copy and paste what you did over and call it good. Please review this, revise it. Some of you needed to articulate more, okay? Some of you didn't include examples from all your work and every single one, okay? But this is basically what Module 7 helped you do, okay? And then there's the next part, strategies, okay? Then you're gonna write, okay, well, identify a strategy for how you're going to use this in your, this particular craft element for your toolkit. Okay, how are you going to implement that? This is more than what we did in Module 7, and identifies the strategies for continuing active and identifying the craft elements. Now notice, you've got these things that I have to grade you on. Agree with distinction, agree with reservation, disagree, not evident. You need to bash me over the head to make sure that I am clear that you are covering these questions, so I can agree with distinction. Does that make sense? All right. And then, as we're still in that craft element, articulates how implementing the identified craft elements will serve one's goal as a writer. So again, this is kind of more of a reflection piece. Explains how identified elements can be used in one's own creative and professional writing. Again, more of a reflection piece. Explains how the identified craft elements might be for one's target audience. So your personal target audience. If you feel like you want to be writing a genre of mystery, so your audience would be mystery writer or readers, okay? So again, now you'll notice there's still something left down here. We'll get to that in just a second. So this part of the rubric, 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 okay? You need to do that for each of those craft elements. So again, let's say you did it for dialogue, and then you provided all these information for dialogue, okay? Then you'd go back and you say, my next thing is going to be, point of view, okay? Then you would say, boom, and you'd answer all these questions for point of view. Boom, okay. And then you do that for the 4 to 6 craft elements you're going to do. So for each craft element, you need to answer all these questions, and it's going to be a lot easier for you if you kind of go one craft element at a time, as opposed to trying to answer all these questions for all the craft elements, okay? So I would suggest you do one element at a time. And again, it kind of says that up here. For each element, you will write about 1 to 2 pages, okay? So you're going to answer all those questions for each of your craft strategies. And then at the very end is one, the last thing you're going to put is finding one's place, okay? Articulate how identify the genre tropes in literature, assess locating one's position in the literary landscape. This kind of talks about how, from something that we had done earlier in the class. So again, this is just kind of more of a reflection that we had talked about, kind of. It pulls on stuff that we learned from before, but it doesn't really deal with the specific craft elements. So this would be for me a paragraph or two at the end of everything. Okay. So again, with love, what I would do: pick an element. Okay. Answer these questions. Boom. Okay. For every single one of those. Okay. For one craft element. Then do that again. Repeat for each craft element, up to between 4 and 6. 4 is fine. Okay, and then when you're done with that, then you write out this finding your one's place. Now you'll notice that it says your assignment should be between 9 and 12 pages long. Okay, in MLA. Okay, so and then instructor, to what extent do you agree? Well, if I have to go down here because it gives me the definitions of these things. Okay. Agree with distinction means that you have demonstrated performance with exceptional insight by connecting content and evidence. This earns 100% on that element. So you need to, like I said, bash me over the head. You are answering every single one of these things. Okay, it's got to be completely evident that you are addressing that prompt, and I don't have to try to figure out what you're saying and how it fits into one of these particular things. So that then would earn you an agree or an agree with reservation. And I want everyone to get agree with distinction. So. There you go. Now, get it done.